Hello once again. Let's slowly start with our next lecture. Artur, 15 years in software engineering, beginning his programming journey with C++ and Perl, then Java and JavaScript in various technical roles. I'm sorry, there's plenty of difficult words. He has worked at Nokia with several Python development teams as a software architect and product owner in one of Nokia's most Python-focused departments. Privately, he enjoys exploring content at the intersection of software, history, and linguistics. Huge round of applause for Artur. Good luck, enjoy.
Thank you. Welcome. This will be a lightning talk titled, What Does History Teach Us About Logging Contextual Information in Python? It's a lightning talk, so we'll be fast. I will make some shortcuts. I will make some assumptions. So the agenda for today, short history of logging, a little bit theory, and then we will move swiftly but surely to some practice. And we will try to put some contextual data in our Python program. So let's start with a little bit of history. So why logging? Most of you are possibly vaguely aware of history of Scrum or unit testing or OOP. I don't know about you. Me, myself, I knew nothing about the historical background of logging itself. So this part will be my attempt at showing you what I found. And whenever I start looking at things like that, I start with words. And in English contemporary language, log is defined as to make a note or record of, enter details of or about in a log. We can already see a chicken or egg problem here. We have a verb and we have a noun. A verb is described by a noun. Don't know what to make out of it. So on a hunch, I followed the verb and I used Google Books to find its usage over the years. So in 1950s, still something that we are mostly aware of, so time-logged records, this kind of stuff, not really interesting. We have to go way, way back in time to 1885, which was the oldest occurrence of this word used as a verb that I found. And the exact phrase that it was used in was something like that. Logged 222, wind southwest, very rough, the genie goes over it like a swan. A little bit cryptic. So this 222, later I found it's nautical miles. It was a daily distance of genie, which was a ship, and that's that. So a little bit of a dead end for me, so I started looking around. This was an excerpt from something called a ship log. And ship log was a practice since as early as 1590s on ships where a mate, captain, or lieutenant would write down measurements or events or just interesting stuff that was important to the ship's journey, such as solar time, wind power, direction, compass course, yada, yada. And this practice initially started as just recording measurements from something that was called a chip log. So what is a chip log? So a chip log is a device that was designed in 16th century to measure ship speed. And how did it work? It had three components: a reel, a log line with a knot every 15 meters, and a lock. A lock in this particular context meant only like a piece of wood that was attached to the line. A sailor would throw this log outside of the ship, and another one, holding a sand glass, would calculate how many knots would spool off the reel. The resulting calculation would give us amount of knots, so nautical miles per hour. So in this particular context, a log just meant a piece of wood. So why do we call a piece of wood a log? Nobody knows, actually. So that was the end of the story for me, so I circled back and tried to organize my thoughts. So we have a log that meant a piece of wood. Then this piece of wood meant a device that was measuring ship speed. Then we had a book that we used to record those measurements. Then it was a verb that meant, let's write something in that book. And then we had a verb that more generally was meaning to record, and that's how we got it in IT. Or so I thought. So this connection from, let's say, common spread use to IT was not necessarily clear to me, so I wanted something more tangible, and then I found this. So to the left, you can see Mark I team of Harvard computational project that was sponsored by US Navy Bureau of Ships, and you can see a very strong naval bias in those engineers. The reason is that most of the computational projects in the beginning of the 20th century were funded by military. To the right, you can see the logbook of this team and first actual case of a bug ever logged. What's noteworthy, all those people then, after the Second World War ended, went on to work for companies in the private sector, like, for example, IBM, working on, for example, OS 360. So that completed the story for me. And as I was working on a segue to the practical part, I was writing down important stuff about logging from the past. And then I saw, like, this is not really that interesting, like some of these points. But one stands out to me. And this is including the main context. And why does it stand out? So when I was doing research, I stumbled upon several scientific papers. In one, scientists took digitalized archived ship logs and modeled 2 centuries worth of geomagnetic field. How? Because they had compass readings in those logs. They had positions. Some other scientists modeled climate changes over the years in 18th century. How did they do that? They had wind speed, they had wind direction, they had occurrences of rain, even sometimes drawings of clouds in those logs. So to me, that was pretty inspiring that logging and contextual information that we have in logs can be a great enabler for new use cases. That being said, let's see how we can do that in practice. So we will stay with maritime theme. We will have a class hierarchy of ships, fleets, navies. Ships can be assigned to fleets, fleets can be assigned to navies, all that stuff. What we'll do is we'll be logging ship speed, for example, ships cruising at 12 knots, and we would like to have some contextual information added to it. For example, if the ship was sailing as part of the Navy or part of the fleet. In practice, this hierarchical approach would be a little bit difficult in the short time we have, so we will flatten it a little bit, and this is what we want to have. A little bit of JSON here, of course, added, not important. So, how do we approach it in practice? In Python, we have several ways of imparting contextual data. And this is not an exhaustive list, just the most popular ones. We can use a statement level extra, which is an argument to a logging invocation. We can use logging adapters, and we can use logging filters. Of course, the engineering way to talk about it would be that all of them are equal, and it really depends on the use case, which one is better or not. I have my preference, and I guess you will see which one it is. So let's start with the statement level extra. So how do we do that? We just put an additional argument and put our stuff in the dictionary here. Simple, and not really much to tell about it, but you immediately start to see that your logging logic starts sipping into your domain code. Here we have only one argument. Imagine 20. then with this 20, you will have mappings. You will have null checks. You will have all the stuff that comes with the formatting of the data. And your domain class will bloat, simply. What's more, we want to have some references from fleets and navies. So how do we do that? We have to add this reference to our domain code. Maybe this is an not important back reference to this particular class. So maybe we can do better. We can use logging adapters. So logging adapters are just wrappers over loggers. And we can clearly see that the first thing that we get is the separation. So logging logic is one place, domain logic is another, and domain logic is clean without logging logic sipping into it. So that's kind of good. So what's wrong with it? Well, two things. First of all, logger adapters, when you look at this code closely, it's not great. So what you're doing in a logging adapter is you're modifying arguments to invocation of logging. Not really explicit, right? And the other thing is, logging adapters are not on the logging hierarchy. So what does it mean? Logging framework doesn't know about logging adapters. You cannot inspect logging framework to figure out whether a logging adapter is there. You can configure logging adapters via logging framework. So maybe we can do better. And that's how we get filters. So immediately you can see that the code in the filter is much more explicit. You are modifying the records. You are not modifying any invocations, so that's great. We still keep our separation of concerns. So everything is peachy. So what's wrong with it? Well, to some of you that program in other languages, you will immediately realize that you are using filter to mutate data. It's a little bit smelly, but we are doing stuff in Python. We can do whatever we want. So let's assume that this is a great solution, and then let's apply it to our code. So what we will do, we'll take this filter, we'll apply it to ships, navies, and fleets, separately adding contextual data to those loggers. Let's run this program. Yeah. So something's missing here. And there is one very interesting quirk when using filters in logging. And that quirk is, when logging data is propagated through logging framework in Python, the filters are only run with the logger that emits the data. Meaning, it won't work like that we just attach filters on the whole way of propagation. We have to attach the filter once to all the loggers, or have one logger and attach all the filters to it. So with this, we run it. It works. Simple, but effective. So if there are two things that I would want to present to you as takeaways from it, there are many, but two main ones, I would say, is first of all, when you are adding logging, do not introduce coupling in your domain code, just for the sake of logging. The other thing is, keep your logging code separate. And that's that. So the last thing I would like to tell you, maybe not necessarily connected with any of that, is a quote that I found in Admiralty Records in 1847. And it says, more or less, something like that. Each lieutenant on board also keeps a log in which are inserted the usual information required and whatever may be useful to navigation or Her Majesty's service. So what does it mean? It means that even in such a rigid organization as 19th century British Navy, we still trusted domain experts to use their intuition to put those logs in the right places. Thank you.